Nobody invites me to make these videos. So anything that I say, it's really to myself. And I enjoy some of the intelligence that I bring to a number of subjects. And in terms of crass considerations, obviously I'm the odd man out already. And I've suffered and know what it means to be held hostage, for example, even though there's a lot of denial about that. I was kidnapped and held hostage as a child. I know what it means, I know how it feels. So I'm not in the dark when it comes to political reprisals or anything, nor do I have any doubts that people can find my breaking point. But at the moment, there's no reason for me to be hysterical about any of that. I just want to discuss what it means to me to be pro Russian. The conflict with Russia as a state that exists as a permanent fixture in America's imagination about things. It's so well rehearsed that one almost doesn't need to do anything but say, I choose this side, I choose that side. Going back in the past to the origins and roots of how people come to choose a side when it comes to uh, fearing Russia. Because there's two reasons to fear Russia. Americans almost always do. One is fear of what Americans will do to you if you don't hate Russia. The other is fear of what Russia will do to you if you extend a hand. Well, my temper when it comes to Russia doesn't extend all that far back into history. I'm not an avid and dedicated scholar of Russian history. I think, however, that fairly recently, late in life, my mind has opened to issues that are unrelated to the ideological conflict concerning Russian art, Russian history, Russian literature. But most of my attention in my developing years that made me question American authority and the madness of the arms race on the American side derived from my readings about the period leading up to World War II and after World War II. Now, a conditioned response to the Russian Revolution is to say it brought into power communism, and communism is hotly hated by people of the possessing class because it presumably contains a right to steal from you for the purposes of redistributing to your neighbors and usually results in a state that mismanages what it steals from private citizens and so on. That's the theory. But also, there was a series of um, attacks on the idea of fair management of resources that emboldened private capitalists to fatten themselves beyond what would be considered a real human interest in the dignities of private property. I believe in the dignities of private property mitigated by state taxation systems that look after the poor more than they look after the rich. So in that sense, I have an open mind when it comes to socialism. I believe in that people should have health care. When you have a situation involving the Russian people, you have to consider the fact that they've had different experiences, they have a different language, but they do have self respect and they have grounds for self respect. Sophie Scholl, whose judgment I trust, she did what I would have done. She leafleted at colleges, anti fascist leaflets, and was killed by Hitler's government for her anti fascist leafleting for a group called the White Rose. Herself took the stand that dog like bellicosity attended the so called anti communist movement that was more revealing about fascists than it was about the intellectual content of communism. My father taught me the same way. He has a book, How to Teach About Communism. It argues not to be dog like and bellicose, but to look at its contents, to critically review its contents. I'm aware that Ayn Rand pointed out that they fail to reward the man of intellect who creates the industry in the first place. I don't know if that's true, but that's what she says. I also know that Vladimir Putin is cognitive when it comes to the excesses of the Soviet Union past. It's part of his intellectual heritage. Vladimir Putin puts forward a very best foot when it comes to his intellectual heritage and assessment of his times and assessment of his intellectual heritage. Now, Russia, in the ending of World War II, wanted to be embraced as a fellow victor. They had sacrificed enormously after pleading with us to help them when we wouldn't open a new front against Hitler to take some of the bloodshed off of them. But we did help them through the north with um, steel and munitions. So we were allies of them, and they wanted something of the alliance to continue. What happened was they had to guard themselves in places like the Ukraine from what had just befallen them. We had no such invasion front. We didn't grasp what was happening. We put forward the idea of domino effects and said that we had to, domino theory said we had to issue containment orders. They were out to exploit communism. That appears to me to have been contrary to the truth. It fed itself as a bellicose dog like dogma. It led to terrible tragedy in North Korea. We failed to assess the human dimension of the Russian people. We failed to assess the human dimension of the North Korean people. And we continue to do that through a dog like, slave like obedience to a theory of them as totalitarians in the making. That only comes true because of this nasty proclivity to be fascist towards them, which is what they hate most for good reason, and what we should hate for good reason rather than ally ourselves to fascism. There's no such thing as friendly fascism. There's no such thing as um, safe exploitation of the vulnerable. Now, a situation that has developed with Putin clearly mandates saying we wish it would stop. We wish that it would come to a stop. It's complicated, he says, and I believe that. I realize that everyone has rehearsed the issues and knows where the rationals stand. There's this theory that Russia wants to push forward and gobble, but it's not necessarily true. It serves the purpose of the domino theorist, but it's not necessarily true. So, since we have created a crisis situation by pushing and banging and hammering at Russia's doorstep and refusing to embrace the tragedy of the Russian people, uplift them, thank them for their help in World War II, be gracious towards them, meet them with non-corrupt assessment of what it is that they need and they want. We've ended up in a pressure cooker that has become a great deal more hostile than is warranted on all sides. So there's the situation, but it doesn't explain what I mean by pro-Russian. What I mean by pro-Russian is I think people should and explore Vladimir Putin's points of view as a person. I don't think he has completely exhausted all tolerance for his gifts, but I realize that there's rational grounds to disagree with that. I would be interested in hearing from trade union leaders about that. However, there's also a personal issue of whether he is one of the menacing people who is using me as a pincushion in this cerebral celebrity system that has created a situation of such caustic satire and existentialism about simple American dignities in romance, that the idea of a romantic artist is so hateful and German to him that he wants to see me exterminated as some kind of object. I don't know. I have never asked him. I've never heard from him about that. I'm not the type of person to just lambast my fellow man. I have questions. I love Navalny. I think he's a brilliant person. If that offends Vladimir Putin, tough luck. I think they could work out their differences. I think they should try to work out their differences. I would be engrossed in the voyage if they tried to work out their differences. I hate to see a dissident behind bars. It goes against my grain. I loved reading Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I loathed his pro-war stance about Vietnam. I was sufficiently aware that communists were being forced into a pigeonhole, into an intellectual ghetto, were being so insufferably abused, that Ho Chi Minh had reached out to us. And that appears to be the precedent that people like Boris Yeltsin and Gorbachev had followed. The precedent of Ho Chi Minh, of reaching out to us and being repudiated senselessly by fascist tendencies in our society. But that's still not what I mean when I say pro-Russian. What I mean when I say pro-Russian is I'm interested in the work of Dostoevsky. I'm interested in the work of Turgenev. I'm interested in the work of Ouspensky. I'm interested in the views of Putin, Navalny. I'm interested in the skating team of Kamila Valieva. I'm interested in the way that they have published their views in new Russian modernist readers. I'm interested in the Chernuka cinema. I love House of Fools. I loved Moscow Does Not Believe in Tears. I see in them all the human sensibilities that apply to the West. I see some differences in the cultural arrangements that they live with. I realize that Navalny has said some things that are overly provocative, for example, about refugees. I know that people are human. They say things off the cuff when they're stressed that don't play back. I'm not from cancel culture, at least not usually. There are things that I will not endure. I will not endure being told that poisoning me was okay. I will not endure having my name put on a script about genocide and say that that's okay. I cannot endure that. I cannot endure being blamed for Hiroshima. I had nothing whatsoever to do with it. Cannot endure being told that by believing that Russia has reason to be afraid of encroachment through the Ukraine by people who swindled the anti-ballistic missile treaty and smuggled in hypersonics if that's what they plan to do. That therefore I want to see the massacre of women and children in Mariupol. I do not want to see anything of the kind. I oppose those kinds of behaviors. It is incumbent upon me to say that my heart went out to the Russian POWs I saw. They felt fooled. They felt like cannon fodder. They felt like intellectuals who had been torn to shreds by being given immoral orders. They had conscience. They had thinking processes. They were reasonable, sentient human beings. Don't care to pass judgment against them. I realize that they were in a situation that was absolutely untenable, that nobody wants to be in. And that is the situation that I am being put in. I'm not so pro-Russian that I'm willing to be put into an untenable situation by people who are from Russia. And I'm not so pro-US that I'm willing to be put in an untenable situation by people who nurture the fascism of America's proclivities to be fascist. What I am is a simple civilian who is deaf, that's all. My heart goes out to people. I'm a poet. I know that there are people who enjoy my poetry. I don't like doing tribute, but the fact that I enjoyed reading about Russia is part of my intellectual heritage as a poet. I don't have to defend that. It's only human for someone to think that Russia is beautiful. They do beautiful things. They are beautiful people. They are intelligent, they are charismatic, and they are suffering from the same difficulties and dissonances that each and every one of us do. They have addictions. They have mental health problems. They have challenges that are economic. They have challenges that are strategic. They have people who care about each other. They have people who don't want to be used for a senseless war. And I think that the lack of intelligent sensitivity towards the Russian people contributed to this problem. And I don't intend to be pigeonholed by Western extremists saying that you should close the book on Russia because they've proven themselves everything the people have claimed they fear about Russia. I don't believe that there's any sense to those points of views. It has led to a waste. It has led to the gobbling of the planet without any restrictive measures that are mutual and agreed upon through our abhorrence of keeping to treaties that make sense. We need arms control treaties. We need ecological treaties. We need the shipments from the grain from the Ukraine to reach people who are blameless. The people of Africa are blameless in the mess between the East and West, between Russia and the United States, between Vladimir and Vladimir. We need people to help solve this problem so the grain reaches the hungry people in Africa who are blameless. They're hungry. They are struggling enough. They have to face drought. They have to face famine. They have to face climate change. They have to face ignorant genocidal tendencies from people who are hysterically privileged and want to subordinate the tragedy of the circumstances that our societies of the industrial and affluent have helped create. They are trying to pick at us. They're promoting their own humanity. When I say that I am pro Russian, I am promoting the humanity of Russia, not the artillery, the munitions, the warfare, the steady beat of drums. I am saying that their humanity means something. And when I'm told that the only thing it means is trickery, I disbelieve that. I know that's not true. I know that it's not true that the United States is past the point of no return, but I hear it and I see the tendency to become what we fear, to become what we dislike, to create situations that are senseless and unnecessary to create. I'm not the ignorant person that Pittsburgh has made me out to be. I don't own weapons, not because I'm naive. I have been held hostage. I have been subject to obliterating attacks. I have been poisoned. I'm not a masochist. I'm not somebody like Sean Strub or Michael Foucault who is looking to be shot up with AIDS in order to be a messianic martyr to a social movement and a dialectical fringe that Brian Eno paints John Lennon as something of a saint of. I'm none of those things. What I am is a poet who is deaf, who lives in Section 8 and is now elderly. My compassion for people is what drives me. I'm not stupid. I realize I make myself more vulnerable in some ways, but at the same time, I play the odds in my own favor. When I go out into the street, I reassure my friends, my family, my neighbor that the laws of our self governing system are real and meant to give us a measure of safety. The Russian people are also entitled to a measure of safety. They're entitled to feel safe from our master plans of paranoia and our hallucinations of demonic purpose. And without going overboard and extending some kind of mysterious spirit of trust, I do believe that living in a normal society and behaving rationally includes not being afraid. It includes a presumption of your own safety. I believe that people who are so armed that they can destroy the planet lose a feeling of safety in the process that they are entitled to. So they end up losing what they're looking for. People need to feel safe. They have a right to feel safe. And one of the things that helps us to feel safe is to return home safely after a day when we have extended the presumption of safety, not just to others, but to ourselves. Again, I have been taken prisoner. I have been held hostage when I was much smaller than I am now. I'm not a naive person. I know the suffering and the pain. I recognize it. And my heart goes out to the Russians when I see the films of them being attacked by the Germans. I have watched old newsreels. They have left an indelible impression on my psyche. I know those people and I have stood in their shoes and I understand. But at the same time, I'm not registered as one of them. I'm an American citizen and I have to hold myself answerable to the culture that I live in. And the culture that I live in, the best way to show your support for the people of the Ukraine is through the magic word appreciation. You have to look and appreciate what these cultures provide in terms of meaning to be shared by all of us. I believe the Russian people do not want this war. I don't know if or why the leaders of Russia seem to want this war. I cannot answer for them. I wouldn't presume to answer for them. If they don't want it, I think it should stop. But I agree with Pope Francis. I think that some of it looks provoked by the West. And there's no excuse for it. What we need to do is come to grips with the fact that in order to heal the planet from the mania of World War II, we have to embrace people. We do not always, for the simple fact that we do share the planet and have a common interest in protecting it. That means protecting one another.